Molly and the Bees. Molly is very proud of her shiny yellow paintwork. She loves to pull passengers across the island and deliver goods to all sorts of places on Sodor. But sometimes Molly can be a bit sensitive about things and doesn't like being teased at. One morning Molly was passing Tidmouth Station. Percy was there shunting trucks of China clay. He was waiting for Bill and Ben to deliver the rest of the trucks. Molly whistled cheerfully. "Hello, Molly," smiled Percy. "Your yellow paint is sparkling today." Molly beamed from buffer to buffer, but then they heard a faint buzzing sound. They looked at the trucks. The buzzing came from there.
"What's that buzzing sound?"
wondered Molly. Then, from behind a fruit truck, a small bee flew out and buzzed towards Molly. Molly was surprised.
"Oh no!"
she cried.
Go away, shoo!"
But the bee buzzed around Molly. Molly hardly dared puff.
"Help!"
she cried.
"Help me, please!"
The foreman raced over to see what was happening. When he saw the bee and how scared Molly was, he had an idea. He pulled out a jam sandwich out of his pocket and waved it about. The bee saw this and flew straight towards it. Molly heaved a sigh of relief.
"Phew!"
she sighed.
"Thank you."
The foreman spoke to Molly. "It's all right, Molly," he said, "but there was no need to shout like that. Bees won't hurt you as long as you don't annoy them." Molly felt silly, but Percy felt sorry for Molly. "Don't be upset, Molly," he said. "I don't like bees either. I would be scared too if I saw a bee fly towards me." Molly felt better. She was glad to have a good friend in Percy. "Come on, Molly," called Molly's driver. "Time to collect our passengers." And Molly puffed away to Knapford Station. But as she puffed along, she could still feel the buzzing around her boiler. Now she didn't like bees at all.
"I'll have to be careful not to pass any bees on the way,"
she thought. Molly puffed into Knapford Station to collect her passengers. Gordon, Henry and James were there. They had heard what had happened to Molly and they couldn't help but laugh. "Having trouble with bees, are you?" laughed Henry. "Looks like I'm not the only one who hates bees," chuckled James, remembering the time a bee had stung him in the nose. Then the guard blew his whistle. Molly was relieved when it was time to go. "Don't let any bees get you all buzzed up," sniggered Gordon.
"This isn't funny,"
huffed Molly.
"You know I'm a very sensitive engine."
Molly puffed away without saying goodbye to the engines. Soon, Molly was racing down the line with her passengers. She was now starting to enjoy herself. She didn't think about bees once.
"Now I can enjoy the rest of the day for sure,"
she smiled happily. Then Molly was passing a big field. It was full of green grass and fresh flowers. There were bluebells, sunflowers and daisies. But Molly didn't know that there were bees near them. As she raced past them, the bees left the flowers and started to buzz towards Molly. Molly had no idea what was about to happen. Then she saw a bee buzz in front of her, and then another, and another. Suddenly, a swarm of bees started to buzz around Molly. The driver and fireman were surprised too. The driver tried to avoid them, but it didn't work. Now Molly was very worried.
"Stop!"
she shouted. The driver applied the brakes and Molly came to a stop by a field. As she did so, the bees buzzed all around her. They buzzed under her wheels and landed on her paintwork. Molly was now feeling more nervous than last time. The passengers got out to see what was going on. They were surprised when they saw Molly. "What's going on?" they asked. The driver explained the situation. "It seems the bees have taken a liking to Molly," he said.
"Why me?"
asked Molly. "Bees like anything that's yellow," explained the fireman. "Your bright yellow coat of paint must interest them." Molly didn't like the sound of this. She wanted the bees to go away and leave her alone.
"Please, bees,"
she cried.
"go away, I want to get going."
But it didn't work. The bees wouldn't budge and they wouldn't fly away either. Just then Percy arrived with some jam wagons. He gasped when he saw what was happening. "Molly!" he cried.
Help me, please.
Moaned Molly. Molly's driver, fireman and the guard tried to think about what to do, but nothing came to mind. Then Percy had a thought. "Do bees like jam?" he asked his driver. The driver gasped. "Percy, that's it!" he cried. "Everyone, I have a plan!" His driver and fireman climbed down and walked over to the field. He explained the plan to them. "We need to lay out slices of bread and butter and lots of jam on the field," he said. "The bees will then fly off Molly and go towards the jam, but we must hurry." The drivers, firemen, the guard and the passengers worked as fast as they could. They took some jam out of Percy's trucks and took them to the coaches. Then the passengers laid the slices of bread onto the field. It took a long time. Soon the field was full of bread, butter and jam. Everyone climbed back into the coaches. Percy and Molly watched and waited. Then one bee left Molly and flew towards the jam. Then a few more flew away, and then more and more bees left Molly. Soon the whole swarm left Molly and flew towards the field. Everyone was relieved. Molly gave a huge sigh of relief. "Right then," said her driver, "let's get moving. We're late." Molly gasped, so she puffed away smoothly and carefully. She smiled to Percy as she set up.
Thank you.
She whispered. Percy smiled and set off for the yards. Molly was soon speeding along the line as fast as she could. She was determined to make up for lost time. Her wheels spun and steam puffed out of her funnel. She soon reached Wellsworth Station. She knew she was late and was very worried. The Fat Controller was cross. "Molly, where have you been?" he boomed. The passengers got out of the train and told the Fat Controller what a bad railway it was. Then they all looked at Molly. She sighed sadly and explained what had happened.
It wasn't my fault, Flair, she said. The bees came out of nowhere and flew all around me.
The Fat Controller sighed. "Molly, you shouldn't be scared of bees," he said. "Bees are more frightened of you than you are of them. I think you have some making up to do to all these passengers." Molly felt sad, but she couldn't think of anything to say. The passengers could see Molly was upset and how sorry she was. "I think you need a rest, Molly," suggested the Fat Controller. "I shall get Neville to take your train."
"Yes, sir,"
wheezed Molly as she puffed sadly away to the sidings. That night the engines were all teasing Molly about what had happened. "Maybe you should change your coat of paint," teased Henry. "Then the bees won't like you so much," chuckled Gordon. "Take some honey with you next time," laughed James. "Sounds like you had a very buzzy day," giggled Boko. Molly didn't like this at all. She felt very upset. Percy didn't like this at all. He blew a loud whistle. "Stop this at once!" he shouted. "Molly doesn't like bees at all. She gets upset when there's a bee near her, and you, James, should be more helpful. You know what it's like to be stung by a bee." James suddenly went silent. "Molly is a very sensitive engine, and we should all be more helpful and understanding towards her," Percy finished. "She's a very special engine and a very special friend, and should be treated like one." The engines all went silent. They didn't say a word. Then after thinking hard, they all realised Percy was right. Molly was amazed. She had never heard so much silence before.
"Thank you, Percy,"
she smiled.
"and thank you for coming to my rescue today."
"That's all right, Molly," smiled Percy. "I know you don't like bees, but I thought you were very brave today, and brave engines are really useful engines indeed." Molly beamed happily. She was very happy to have such a good friend in Percy, but Molly and Percy knew that she will never forget her tale of bees and jam.